review. Book 101 is all about the books that I read for the last 40 years. And today I have my special guest. He is the author of several books, no other than Mr. Eric Jay Sonnenschein.
Hello there, Daniel. Nice to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Welcome to Book 101, Mr. Eric. And can you please introduce more about yourself?
Okay, thank you. My name is Eric Jay Sonnenschein. Sonnenschein is like the German spelling of sunshine, so that should be easy. You can find me at Eric Sonnenschein at gmail.com, also at ericsonnenschein.com, which is my website. I'm an author. I have an author page on Amazon. I've written 10, 10 books. I've published 10 books up till now, 5 novels, 4 collections of essays, and 1 collection of poetry. But imminently, within this month, I will be dropping another book, which will be my 5th collection of essays. It's titled Culture Crazed. Daniel, if anybody has seen, I've been on your show once before on your podcast. Everybody knows that I write essays and I write novels, and everything that I write is based somewhat on my experience, my point of view, my experience. Every other essay collection that I've written until now has had a theme. My first one, Making Up for Lost Time, was a little bit about, it was about my life, about observations, a lot of quite a few essays about wildlife in the city, like a red rooster, a caterpillar in Rockefeller Center, and so on. But also about the struggle to get that first book published. I had a funny story about pigeons, another about walking in a leather jacket and being the victim of some pigeon droppings and so on. But that was my first book, Making Up for Lost Time. And then ever since then, I've written a collection. I've written collections of essays that have reflected other aspects of my life. I wrote all over the place with essays from A to Z, which was literally that. Every essay title began with a different letter of the alphabet. There were 26 essays. And they also dealt with contemporary issues, contemporary living. My third book of essays was titled Sartre in the Subway. That took a more philosophical approach. It was about being an it was sort of reflecting my education and my philosophical interest in existentialism, Jean-Paul Sartre, and viewed contemporary reality, contemporary living through the prism of existentialism. And then I did Self-Helpless. I published that in 2021. And Self-Helpless was really a takeoff on the self-help book. Self-help books are written by, usually psychologists or people who are in the help profession. So social workers, psychologists. Sometimes they're written by experts in a particular field like business. My self-help book, Self-Helpless, was taken from the standpoint of somebody who actually goes through all of these problems themselves, rather than be somebody who's an expert who tells people who have problems how they should deal with them. And as you can imagine, I took a kind of a humorous view toward all of that. But this book, Culture Crazed, which is my 5th collection of essays, the theme is all about culture. And what do I mean by culture? Well, it's about films, art, music, television, and it's also about certain cultural habits like handwriting, reading. It's about all kinds of issues that relate to the culture that we all share. And it's It's actually ever since I was a student. Obviously, I studied culture. I studied English. I studied French. I studied philosophy. I studied fine art. I studied film. I studied all of these issues, and then as I went forward in life, I continued to immerse myself in culture as a teacher, as a professor, and also as an art critic and as an artist myself. So I come to this to the subject, the broad subject of culture, from a standpoint of having always been involved in it in one from various perspectives. Culture crazed is also, though, it's about where we are now, how things have changed in our culture from, let's say, 50 years ago, 25 years ago to the present. It's you you're quite young, but I'm sure you know that 20 back in 1975, 1980, even though there were computers, the computer had not become such an integral part of people's lives. Now, because of the computer and because of social media, more and more people have the freedom and the power to present their creative product without going through gatekeepers, without the need of approval from the great institutions of publishing, the publishing industry, the television industry, the film industry, or or the music industry, or art galleries, or art museum curators. None of those gatekeepers are integral to becoming successful, or at least to becoming present and relevant as an artist. Now, all you need to do as an artist is to do the art and to present it, really, to find the way to present it and find an audience. And so I'm really, this book, that one of the sub themes of Culture Crazed is it's about freedom. I wrote one essay that appears in Culture Crazed is called Publishing, Requiem or Revolution. And in this essay, I basically give a synopsis, a brief history of what it was like to experience the publishing industry as a young writer, or as a writer trying to publish his work. And I go through how the many different steps, and writing down the names of agents and publishers, and contacting these people by phone and sending them partial manuscripts, and all of this process, waiting for responses. And then in the long run, only a small percentage of people following this process could ever hope to be published. Well, now that's all changed. It's gotten to the point where the agents who used to dictate who their clients were going to be and who would have an opportunity to publish are now in the business of serving writers, of offering book services, book consultation, editing, etc. So that's just one example. I also have a really good an essay, of course, very good. I love this. I love this book. Some of these essays, by the way, I've already kind of workshopped or presented in a less polished form on LinkedIn. I've been posting essays on LinkedIn on my blog there since 2014. So over 11 years, I've posted about 240 essays, and some of them appear in Culture Crazed. But I have one essay which is about, it's really basically about how people today don't need what I just said before. Every creative person out there can just assert that they are creative. They don't need anybody to give them a stamp of approval or to say they're legitimate. They are because they say they are. Now, of course, this creates, in some people's minds, that creates chaos. How are we supposed to know what's good or not if it doesn't come from a publishing house, or it doesn't come out of a major studio? Well, that's uh, that's the cost of freedom sometimes, but I think it's a great cost. I think it's a great trade-off, actually, because so much in the old days, it was almost like people were many writers, many filmmakers, and musicians were almost in exile. They were they were imprisoned by the economic system because they couldn't be legitimate. Nobody would even know they were a writer or a musician, right? Unless an institution said they were, unless they had a record on a particular label like Columbia, or unless their book was published by Random House or Harper, and that's the way it was. But starting really probably almost 50 years ago, filmmakers, there started to be indie filmmakers, musicians started to take control of the production of their own music and have their own record companies. And little by little, but of course, distribution was always a problem. How are you going to get your stuff, your product out into the places where it will be sold? Now, no problem. Amazon is out there and a number of other platforms to help people sell their work, or they can sell them off of their own websites. So that's a little bit about what my book is about, but it's also about other things. It's about, for instance, the films that I think have been important in our lives. For instance, I have one essay. I think everybody knows this, the film Breakfast at Tiffany's. Maybe fewer people know Midnight Cowboy. These are two films about the 1960s. And I believe that these two films tell us a lot about what we're going through now in the 2020s. The 60s were a time of political turmoil and confusion. Now we're going through a time of political turmoil and division and confusion. And so, I've written about those two movies and what we can learn from them and why they're worth seeing today. Um, I've also I've written about an iconic figure like Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis. I don't know if you probably recognize that name. She was one of the most, before Hillary Clinton came along, I think that Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis was probably worldwide the most famous woman for at least a long time. And so there was a movie that came out back maybe 10 years ago called Jackie. And so I go into how Jackie sort of reframes, reshapes the myth of Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis. And I do this. Hugh Hefner, you probably have heard the name Hugh Hefner. Hugh Hefner was an enormously important cultural figure back in the late, I would say the second half of the 20th century, because he began in like 1953. And his Playboy empire was significant from, let's say, the 1960s all the way to when it was dismantled early, I guess, in the 21st century. And Hugh Hefner, he died, and I originally wrote my own kind of obituary for him because it was so influential. Not always in a positive way, by the way, but I wrote I think it's an analytical piece about why Hugh Hefner, what role he played in men's lives and the male psyche, but also the female psyche and the women's liberation movement, and how Playboy magazine actually had a personal impact on me as a young boy growing up. So these are the kinds of things topics that I bring up in Culture Crazed. It's a wide assortment, but I believe that when you read this book, the essays, most of them are quite short. And they each of them make a few, I think, cogent points about the subject. But if you read this book, you really get a sense of where we've been, culturally speaking, over the last, I would say, 50 years. But in a kind of an interest, seeing it as a mosaic, seeing the whole culture as this big organic living thing, that has many, many different aspects to it. Some of them, obviously, things we see or hear, the figures, the great artists who created the world of art that we admire, but also our own personal experiences. For instance, I don't know about your education growing up. I learned how to write by hand. You know, I learned how to write by hand, first print, and then what we call cursive writing, joining the letters together of words. Do you realize, Daniel, that up to maybe even 10 years ago, most of the states in the United States had rendered obsolete the teaching of handwriting? Because children now, from a very early age, they learn how to keyboard, they learn how to type, which was something, a skill that we students, when I was growing up, only learned, let's say, in ninth grade, which was when we were 14, 15 years old. And this has, for me, I write about this, this phenomenon. It's a remarkable change because, humans are not the only tool makers. We know that chimpanzees make tools. We even know that ravens and crows can make tools. I believe even bears can kind of figure out ways, hacks to get what they want. But humans are the only handwriting animals. We are the handwriting animal. We're the painting animal. We're the only animals who actually use our hands to do things that are representational, that are artistic. And so for me, I think handwriting, when we lose handwriting as an art form and as a skill, we're losing, it's almost like we're amputating a very important skill that makes us a unique species. And it's all being done in the name of quote unquote progress. So you see, I talk about in Culture Crazed, I talk about some of the significant improvements to our culture, what I consider to be improvements, like the democratization of the distribution of the arts, but also some of the negative fallout, like the failing to teach handwriting. Do you realize, Daniel, once I was, of course, how could you realize this? You weren't with me, but I was in a Starbucks and I was writing by hand. I was writing in a journal. Do you realize a man came over to me and he said to me, "Sir, I am so impressed. I cannot believe I'm seeing you actually writing something by hand. I haven't seen anybody write anything by hand in so many years." So I was aghast. I didn't know what to I didn't know what to say. I mean, it was almost like he was complimenting me for, I don't know, for using a napkin, or for walking straight forward, or for throwing away a paper cup. For me, I didn't understand why writing by hand was such a wonderful task, such a wonderful talent. But maybe it is becoming that way. So anyway, that's another issue that I raise in Culture Crazed. Also, how, I don't know if you have this wherever you're doing your podcast from, but in New York we have a lot of street performers,
Yes.
and I think that street performance is a very it's a great thing. You almost can tell how great a city is by the number of street performers that you see. I remember when we vacationed in Paris, we saw so many street performers. New York, we have so many of them. But we don't, only recently, I think, have we had so many people doing theater in public places, because theater requires more than one person in a musical instrument. It requires rehearsal. It requires a troupe of people to get together and to work out material, and then to find a place in public to perform it. But I also write about one fantastic performance I saw uh, of this uh, of this nature, um, and it was in a little garden next to a convent of the same uh, um, order of nuns that the late Mother Teresa was the head of. So you get an idea of how broad the compass of culture crazed is. It's really about so many aspects of culture. Um, it has humor. It's analytical, but it's written for people who just like to read. It's not by any means an academic work or something that only English professors or linguistics professors are going to enjoy. Far from that. No, it's a book that wants to bring, in a way, bring culture to people, to tell people, here, this is our culture. This is what we've gone through, and these are perhaps some of the things that you've enjoyed. Maybe you'd never heard of some of these great works. Maybe this will help guide you to them. There's an essay called, and this is an essay that I did an early draft of in LinkedIn, called Tantalus Across the Air Shaft, about Edward Hopper and a particular painting Edward Hopper did of a woman, a neighbor, who was at late night across the way in her apartment. And she was dressed, for nightwear. So she was scantily dressed. And I do a critical analysis of what this kind of painting was about and how it reflected a new age where, first of all, women had their own apartments, where men and women could be living close to each other. People in a city are always living near strangers, and basically picking up some of those themes as well. But also how Edward Hopper was a bit of a transgressive um, uh, painter. He didn't necessarily paint all his subjects were not painted in studios. They were painted as you would in the wild. Whether it was the wild standing on a street, a woman standing on a street in a very light summer dress, or it's a woman in her apartment getting ready to go to sleep, or another, people in their office, a woman standing in at a window, and so on. So,
Mr. Eric, Mr.
yes,
Eric, thank you so much for sharing your book to the world. And to sum up our discussion for today, can you please invite our listeners to support your books as well as your upcoming book?
yes, thank you, Daniel. You can find me at on my Amazon page at Eric Jay Sonnenschein on Amazon. That'll take you right to me. Or you can look at my website, ericsonnenschein.com. And basically, those two ways are perfectly fine ways to get to me. You can also visit my author page on Amazon.com. You can find all of my 10 books and soon my 11 books, including Culture Crazed. There, you can sample them, see what you like. If you feel like short essays, I have several volumes of those, or longer, or novels, which are works of fiction.
Yes, people, let's support Mr. Eric Jay Sonnenschein,
Thank
because if you
you.
support him, more and more and more empowering books like this to come. So, Mr. Eric, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Daniel. Pleasure to see you again. Have a good
Body
evening.
people. See you soon.